Hey everyone, I'm David Ryan Polgar with the organization All Tech is Human based in New York. We are an organization that is committed to growing the responsible tech pipeline, making it more diverse, multidisciplinary, and aligned with the public interest. And speaking of the public interest, really excited today to bring on Art Chang. Art is running for New York City Mayor. So, candidate for New York City Mayor, which is going on right now. So, welcome to the discussion, Art. Love to hear a little bit more about your background and some of the issues you're committed with. And then specifically, today, I know you are launching a digital bill of rights. So we're going to dig in about the digital bill of rights and why this is important. So Art, welcome to the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, David. Really delighted to be here.
Great to have you.
Thank you. So I'm running a campaign as a progressive who is also pro small business. I've spent the past 30 years working across the city government, starting with the city's law department, all the way through 9 years on the campaign finance board and as a co-creator of NYC Votes, but also a 40-year career in the private sector, starting with teaching music and then working in museum exhibit design and construction and architecture, and then switching to investment banking. And then the last 15 years has really been focused on technology, where I helped start the city's tech startup industry with the conference called Venture Downtown back in 1998. I started 2 tech incubators, and I have also been a startup founder or co-founder in 11 tech startups here.
Wonderful. And then why do you think that that hybrid type of experience is important for yourself running for mayor for New York City?
Well, we're in a state right now where the city doesn't work for anybody, and it needs to work for everybody. Today, millennials and younger make up over 50% of the city's population, in fact, of the nation's population. And so this is a highly online, population. And because of COVID, among the many crises that COVID actually unveiled was a crisis in government service. Government access to service is offered through websites that are obsolete, incomplete, hard to use, non-transparent, and non-responsive. And this runs counter to the type of customer service that people in the city and actually in the country have gotten used to from the private sector. And so what I've argued for the past decade is that actually this growing difference between the ease of use and convenience of the private sector and the government actually endangers our democracy. And so it's up to the government to really transform. And so the government needs a transformation. It needs a digital transformation to get to a place where it is responsive and it's a customer service oriented system so that everybody feels like they have a way to engage and a way to deliver and a way to communicate. And then obviously, because of the tech system and the weight of the population, we also have to be able to address different languages, different abilities to connect, including people who do not want to connect by the internet. And so technology actually can support all of those things in a much more comprehensive and easy way than it does today.
I'm going to dig into that a little bit because I think we've all experienced that recently. I know myself and millions of other people have been looking for vaccines, and that was always a very, frustrating process for many individuals. I know, luckily, I was recently vaccinated, so that was good. But I spent hours and hours of time having CVS's site open, Walgreens site open, the governmental website of VMAS open, and others. And then you had technologists who were creating their own type of, vaccine finder types of websites because that was something that was not done more directly. So what have you seen from the rollout with the vaccine that you think is relevant for a lot of your initiatives to make it a little more tech forward, if you will, to kind of bridge that gap that people have? Because like you said, you go on, Amazon or Netflix and you realize the experience is so seamless. And then sometimes governmental services, which are incredibly important, can seem like, not as seamless, to put it kindly.
Right, absolutely. It's a fantastic case study in how government is not supposed to work. Right? The government has all the data, right? The first rollout was supposed to be to people who are involved in the health industries. So people who are, licensed doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, et cetera. The state has a database of the license, all of those licenses. The state knows where they work, where they are, and at the same time, the state also has access to the inventory of vaccines that are coming through. So why isn't the state and the city doing the matching of the supply of vaccines with the people who need them,
Mhm.
instead of forcing people to be the ones to bridge that gap automatically? So, huge thanks and huge kudos to Huge Ma who created TurboVax.
Mhm.
But TurboVax is a Band-Aid, right? It crosses that last 100 feet, right, or that last 100 pixels, if you will, to bring somebody closer in touch with the source of a vaccine. But it is not an immunization record. It doesn't know if you have what your prior conditions are or
Mhm.
your comorbidities. It doesn't know where you live. It doesn't know a whole lot about you. And it's just a tool. And so as we get into this, we start going into this notion of, well, shouldn't we have a vaccine passport, right? The state has tried to set one up called Excelsior, but it
Mhm.
is rife with privacy problems and security problems. Is it HIPAA compliant even? We don't know. So, once you scratch below the surface of these band-aids, the systems become enormously complex. And so what people do, what technologists do, and what the conventional way of doing things is you spec everything out in advance
Mhm.
instead of actually dealing with it in a much more agile way, starting with the end user.
Well, that also brings up the question of the digital divide. I think we've seen, especially with remote learning, really taken off during the pandemic. We've also seen the idea that I was just telling a story of me spending hours on my high-speed internet trying to track down a COVID vaccine, but not everyone has access to the internet, and especially not high-speed internet access. So, I'd love to hear about your campaign and its commitment towards having this broadband access.
Broadband access is a human right in this day and age. To participate in modern society, you not only need high-speed broadband, but you also need an internet-connected device. We have broadband, we have cable running in the streets and almost everywhere in the city, but it's a last 100-foot problem. And then we also have very poor definitions. So, what does broadband mean? What is suitable broadband? All of a sudden with COVID, we jumped from a place where people wanted to access the internet from their homes, you know, instead of all in the evenings. Now it was all day long via video, super high bandwidth consumption, and the systems just weren't prepared for that.
Mhm.
And in addition, we didn't have devices. There's no uniformity of devices. And I think especially of the students in our system who are largely given iPads in a very poorly thought through kind of decision about what types of devices would be best for students trying to learn via the internet. Um, this shouldn't have to be this way. I mean, back in 1994, I was the first project manager on the Queens West waterfront development in Hunters Point in Long Island City. And we implemented universal broadband in 1994 because we knew that people would have to work from home and students would eventually learn from home. And that was, 25 years ago. And so looking at where we are today, it's shameful that the city and the state haven't actually gotten us to a place where it needs to be. Um, and I'll say one more technical issue about this is that, all the approaches seem to be focused on outmoded technology. So we're thinking about everything from the point of view of fixed line systems that go
Mhm.
point to point all the way into somebody's apartment. Well, that's incredibly slow, incredibly expensive, very difficult, and it's not going to meet the needs of today. And instead, we should be looking at those coupled with, mesh networks, for really two-dimensional broadcasting of signal to 5G and a great expansion of 5G. Like we can do this. We can get everybody in the city connected to
Mhm.
broadband. And then we have the more supply chain distribution problems of getting, devices into everybody's hands. But instead of having a multiplicity of devices, we need to think about how we actually standardize some devices for certain applications and certain use cases. And there will always be students who will have exceptions, like students with disabilities who will need a different kind of device, but we can handle those things separately. It's really
Good.
the broadband as an issue.
Okay. And then I think, Art, the last question that we have for you, especially since it's so topical, as I see with the release today of your digital Bill of Rights, love to dig into that, find out a little bit more why you find this to be an important issue, and a little bit more about this overview of the digital Bill of Rights that you're releasing.
Great. Just to sum it up, as I mentioned, the universal broadband is a human right. It should be a right of everybody in the city. So our digital Bill of Rights plan starts off with the right to broadband access at the commercially required speeds, and coupled with a device that can access the internet at those speeds. Um, you know, all government services should then be oriented to providing those services digitally to consumers where they are in the language that meets their needs, in the channel that meets their needs. And so that should also be something that people have the right to. But there are things kind of behind the scenes that people don't really understand. Like, I'm willing to bet that you have no idea what your terms of service are with the city when you access a city website. I'm sure you have no idea what the use is of the city's data that it collects as you use their websites. You have no idea about what data the city collects on you as you walk down the street. If there is information about you that is incorrect, how do you find it and how do you correct it? There's no affirmative right to do those things. And then I think finally, it's like, what is the city's obligation to protect your data? Right? We've seen, huge breaches by, Equifax, and LinkedIn was just hacked the other day. What is a city's obligation to protect your data from cyber terrorism or cybersecurity? And what is their obligation to inform you if your data has been stolen? Right? None of this is spelled out. So we need to create this framework. And I'll actually kind of take this to the next level, which is the opposite of this. And this is why we have such an urgency around this, is that we know that there are already many forms of data usage by the city, particularly in law enforcement, that go to an extreme that looks very Orwellian. The police department is using facial recognition and biometric surveillance technology. Right? There are databases that have alleged associations of people with gangs, with not necessarily evidence. There are mass searches for data based on geofencing or search terms that are not based upon a warrant for a very specific person. Right? The police department is thinking about using drones. We've seen the robot dog. So what are the terms of service for the data that those robots are collecting on us? And then we know that the city is actually sharing data with ICE. We're supposed to be a sanctuary city, but through intermediaries of the NYPD, we are sharing information with ICE. And and people don't know about these things. So we need to actually have a much more affirmative relationship to our data, which belongs to us, and really clearly understand what the city's obligation is to manage that. So what I propose in this is that the Digital Bill of Rights would be proposed by the mayor's office in partnership with the city council, and will be ratified by the city council as a way to keep the checks and balances going, to make sure that there's a full alignment between the policy making and lawmaking of the council and the execution ability of the mayor.
I love it. And like you said, very topical, especially with the RoboDog getting the backlash recently, used by the NYPD, made by Boston Dynamics. We know from their viral videos, but seeing it in action certainly made a lot of people uncomfortable. So Art Chang, really appreciate you having the conversation with me and All Tech is Human and our audience, building the responsible tech pipeline. Where can people find out more about your Digital Bill of Rights and stay in touch with your campaign?
Absolutely. So my website is at chang.nyc. That's chang.nyc. I invite anybody to book a Zoom open office hours with me right on the website. And we can carry on these conversations, at a time that's convenient for you.
That's very kind of you. So Art Chang, thank you for coming on for this conversation. I'm David Ryan Polgar, the founder of All Tech is Human. So again, Art Chang, a candidate for New York City Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.